Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. How many of you have ever felt that paralyzing, gut-wrenching fear? The kind that stops you in your tracks, makes your heart race, and makes you question everything. Whether it's the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, or the fear of the unknown, we've all been there. We've all faced that moment when fear tries to hold us back from the life we're meant to live. Fear is an innate part of the human experience. It is one of the most powerful emotions that we all face, regardless of who we are or where we come from. At its core, fear is a protective mechanism. It's there to keep us safe, to alert us to danger, and to ensure we survive in situations that might threaten our well-being. From an evolutionary perspective, fear is what helped our ancestors survive in the wild. It was the warning signal that told them when to fight, when to flee, or when to freeze in the face of danger. But in today's world, most of the fear we experience isn't life-threatening. It's often tied to more abstract or psychological concerns: fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown. Fear becomes a barrier to growth, progress, and achieving our dreams. The first step in overcoming fear is to acknowledge it. Acknowledging fear doesn't mean succumbing to it or letting it control you. It means recognizing it for what it is and understanding its role in your life. Fear, as overwhelming as it can sometimes feel, is simply an emotional response to a perceived threat. The key word here is perceived. In many cases, the fear we experience is not based on an actual threat, but rather on our own thoughts, beliefs, and projections about what might happen. This fear can become so powerful that it can paralyze us and prevent us from taking the actions that will ultimately lead to growth, success, and fulfillment. When we acknowledge fear, we take the first step toward disarming it. Often, fear becomes amplified in our minds simply because we try to avoid it or suppress it. The more we push it away, the more it grows, creating a sense of dread or anxiety that seems impossible to overcome. This is why acknowledgement is so powerful. When you acknowledge fear, you bring it out into the open. You recognize its presence and say, I see you, I know you're here, but you don't control me. Acknowledgement is not about succumbing to fear. It's about recognizing that fear is simply a response to change, to stepping outside of your comfort zone, or to facing something new. It's not about trying to eliminate fear. It's about understanding that fear is part of the journey. Fear often arises when we are about to make a decision that could lead to significant change in our lives. Whether it's making a career change, pursuing a new relationship, or starting a new business, change is inherently uncertain, and uncertainty breeds fear. Our brains are wired to seek familiarity and predictability because it keeps us safe. The unknown, on the other hand, represents a threat to that safety, and so fear emerges as a protective mechanism. However, it's important to recognize that fear is often a sign that we are stepping into an area where we can grow and learn. It's when we challenge ourselves and take risks that we break free from the limitations that hold us back. The problem with fear is that it can distort our perception of reality. It can cause us to imagine worst-case scenarios that are unlikely to happen. We envision failure, rejection, or embarrassment, and these imagined outcomes fuel our hesitation and self-doubt. But when we take a step back and look at the situation from a more rational perspective, we often realize that the worst-case scenarios are not as catastrophic as our minds made them out to be. Most of the time, the consequences of failure are not nearly as severe as we imagine, and even if we do fail, it's usually an opportunity for growth, learning, and course correction. Acknowledging fear allows us to confront these exaggerated perceptions and see them for what they truly are: thoughts and stories that we've created in our minds. Another critical aspect of acknowledging fear is recognizing its root cause. Fear is not always random or unfounded. It often stems from past experiences, societal conditioning, or personal beliefs that we've internalized over time. For example, many people fear public speaking because they have experienced judgment or embarrassment in the past. These past experiences shape their beliefs about their abilities and cause them to fear similar situations in the future. Similarly, fear of failure often comes from childhood experiences where success was highly valued and failure was seen as something to be avoided at all costs. These deeply ingrained beliefs about success and failure can fuel fear and prevent people from taking risks. By acknowledging these underlying beliefs, we can start to challenge them and reframe our thinking. The goal is to realize that our fear is often based on limiting beliefs, not objective reality. One of the most powerful ways to acknowledge fear is to bring awareness to the physical sensations that accompany it. Fear is not just an emotion, it also manifests physically. You may notice your heart rate quicken, your palms get sweaty, or your breathing becomes shallow. These are all signs that your body is reacting to fear, even if your mind hasn't fully processed it yet. By becoming aware of these physical sensations, you can begin to detach from the fear itself. Instead of allowing the fear to overwhelm you, you can use these physical sensations as signals to breathe deeply, stay calm, and ground yourself in the present moment. The more you practice this, the more you'll realize that fear, in and of itself, is not as overwhelming as it seems. It's simply your body reacting to change or uncertainty. The key is to not let those physical sensations dictate your actions. In addition to acknowledging fear, it's important to reframe your mindset around fear. Rather than seeing fear as a signal to stop, start seeing it as a signal to move forward. Every great achievement in life involves some level of fear. Whether it's starting a new business, speaking on stage, or taking a leap of faith in a personal relationship, fear is often present at the threshold of something significant. Instead of allowing fear to paralyze you, use it as a tool to propel you forward. Fear shows you where your boundaries are, where you need to push yourself, and where you have the opportunity to grow. It's like a compass that points you in the direction of your next breakthrough. When you acknowledge fear, you also give yourself permission to act despite it. Fear is not a reason to stop, it's a signal to step up and take action. The more you acknowledge fear and move through it, the more you build resilience, confidence, and mental strength. Every time you face fear head on and continue moving forward, you expand your comfort zone and reinforce your belief that you can handle whatever challenges come your way. The key is to acknowledge fear, not as something to avoid, but as an essential part of the growth process. Fear is not your enemy, it's your ally. It's telling you that you're on the verge of something powerful. By acknowledging it, you take away its power over you. You understand that fear is simply a part of the journey, a sign that you are pushing beyond your limits and growing into the person you were always meant to become. When we think of fear, it's easy to assume that it's something to be avoided, something we should get rid of or push away. After all, fear can make us feel uncomfortable, anxious, and hesitant. But what if we told you that fear doesn't have to be the enemy? What if, instead of trying to eliminate fear, you could change your relationship with it? Imagine for a moment that fear becomes not something that holds you back, but something that propels you forward, something that works in your favor rather than against you. This is not only possible, but it's one of the most powerful ways to transform your life. When you change your relationship with fear, you stop seeing it as a threat to your well-being and start seeing it as a signal of growth. Fear is a natural part of the human experience, and its purpose is to protect us. It's part of our evolutionary makeup, a survival mechanism that keeps us alert to potential dangers. But the world we live in today is vastly different from the one our ancestors faced. Most of the fears we experience are not related to life-threatening situations. They are often tied to personal growth, stepping outside of our comfort zones, and confronting the unknown. These types of fears are typically rooted in our own perceptions and beliefs. So the first step in changing your relationship with fear is to reframe it. Reframing fear means looking at it from a different perspective. Rather than seeing fear as something to be avoided or something that will stop you from achieving your goals, see it as an indicator that you are about to do something important. Fear often arises when you're on the verge of something meaningful, when you're about to make a significant change in your life, take a big step forward, or challenge yourself in a way you haven't before. In other words, fear often signals that you are pushing up against your limits, expanding your comfort zone, and moving toward personal growth. This shift in perception can be incredibly liberating. When you start to recognize that fear is often a sign of progress, it becomes less intimidating. You can then begin to welcome it rather than shy away from it. Instead of thinking, I'm afraid, therefore I can't, you can begin to think, I'm afraid, therefore I must. This simple shift in mindset can radically change the way you approach challenges. Fear is not an enemy trying to stop you, it's a messenger telling you that what you are about to do is important. When you see fear through this lens, it no longer holds the power to paralyze you. Instead, it motivates you to take action. It becomes a driving force, a reminder that you are doing something significant. Another way to change your relationship with fear is to acknowledge that it doesn't have to control you. For many people, fear can feel like an overwhelming force that takes over their minds and bodies. It triggers a fight or flight response that makes them freeze or retreat from the very thing they want to achieve. The key to changing your relationship with fear is realizing that you don't have to let it dictate your actions. Fear is just an emotion, and like all emotions, it is temporary. It will pass. And in the meantime, you have the ability to choose how you respond to it. When fear arises, instead of giving into it, you can choose to take action anyway. You can acknowledge that the fear is present, but that it does not control you. In fact, you can use it as fuel to move forward. The more you take action despite your fear, the more you build confidence and resilience. Every time you move through fear, you prove to yourself that you are capable, that you can handle whatever comes your way, and that fear does not have the power to hold you back. Over time, as you continue to face fear head on, you develop a greater sense of self-trust. You learn that no matter what fears arise, you can face them and still move forward toward your goals. One of the most powerful ways to change your relationship with fear is to focus on the bigger picture. Often, fear arises because we're hyper-focused on the potential risks and obstacles in our path. We get stuck in the what-ifs and imagine all the ways we could fail. This focus on the immediate fears can be paralyzing, keeping us stuck in a state of inaction. But when we take a step back and focus on the bigger picture, the larger goal we're striving toward, the fear often fades into the background. We start to realize that the potential rewards far outweigh the temporary discomfort of facing our fears. When you change your relationship with fear, you learn to move through it rather than avoid it. This is where true personal growth happens. Every time you take a leap of faith, every time you step into the unknown, you expand your comfort zone and become more resilient. This process of facing and overcoming fear is how we grow, evolve, and create the life we truly desire. As you begin to take action despite your fears, you'll start to notice that your fears lose their power over time. The more you step up and face them, the less they control you. You become desensitized to their grip, and eventually they no longer stop you from pursuing your dreams. Changing your relationship with fear also requires a willingness to embrace discomfort. Growth is uncomfortable. Change is uncomfortable. Pursuing something new or challenging is uncomfortable. Fear is simply the body's reaction to discomfort. But discomfort is not something to fear. Discomfort is a sign that you are stretching beyond your limits, pushing yourself towards something greater. Instead of avoiding discomfort, learn to embrace it as a necessary part of the process. The more comfortable you become with discomfort, the less power fear will have over you. You can also begin to see fear as an opportunity to learn. Instead of letting fear stop you, use it as a signal that you're about to embark on something that will teach you something valuable. Every time you face a fear, you gain insights, skills, and experiences that make you stronger. Even if you fail, that failure becomes a lesson, a stepping stone on your journey to success. Failure isn't something to be feared. It's a powerful teacher that helps you grow, refine your approach, and ultimately succeed. Fear, when viewed through the lens of opportunity, becomes something that serves you rather than holds you back. It becomes a tool for transformation, a guide that directs you toward the things you need to work on and the lessons you need to learn. You can start to look at fear as a friend rather than an enemy and ally that challenges you to become better, stronger, and more capable of achieving your dreams. Ultimately, when you change your relationship with fear, you free yourself from the mental and emotional shackles that have kept you from reaching your potential. You begin to realize that fear is not a roadblock, it's a stepping stone. It's not something to avoid, it's something to move through. And as you move through it, you will find that your fears lose their power over time, and you begin to step into the fullest, most powerful version of yourself.